The Greek War of Independence, also known as the Greek Revolution, was a pivotal moment in world history that reshaped the course of a nation and inspired movements for freedom worldwide. From 1821 to 1832, Greece rose against the Ottoman Empire, fueled by a thirst for liberty and a yearning to revive its ancient glory. This is the story of brave revolutionaries, the influence of the Enlightenment, and the critical support of powerful allies like Britain, France, and Russia. In this video, we'll explore the key battles, iconic leaders, and the cultural and political significance of this struggle for independence. Join us as we explore how the Greek spirit overcame insurmountable challenges and sparked the flames of freedom. The Greek myth of the Greek Revolution in 1821 revolves around Bishop Georgios Germanos, a prominent Greek leader and personal friend of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch. He was summoned to Tripolis to discuss plans for the revolution against the Turkish rulers, and promised a miracle to 1,500 armed peasants at Ayalavra. Germanos claimed that Greece could no longer remain subjects of the Sultan, and that the whole of Greece was compromised by action already taken against the Turks. He claimed the islands of the Aegean and districts and cities as far north as Ali Pasha's domain, a boundary not achieved until nearly a century later. Ayalavra has become a significant venue for the Greeks' revolution, as it links the Greeks' revolution to the Bible, religious faith, and the Orthodox Church. The Church had been the main preserver of Greek national identity throughout nearly 400 years of Turkish rule. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II launched his Ottoman forces in a final attack on Byzantium's capital Constantinople, pillaging churches and seeking asylum from the terrified inhabitants. The terms of the Patriarchate laid down the framework of semi-autonomy for Christians in the Ottoman Empire, guaranteeing personal inviolability, freedom of movement, exemption from taxes and taxation for the Orthodox. However, the promise not to convert churches to mosques was overridden by later sultans, who involved church leaders in the politics of the Sultan's court. During the Ottoman Empire, Greek subjects faced significant taxation issues, particularly the harak, or poll tax. The tax system was based on a constitutional contract between the Sultan and his non-Muslim subjects, guaranteeing their lives, liberties, and property in return for certain restrictions. However, the annual collection of taxes from the whole community was seen as a scorpion. Greek peasants found themselves trapped in a web of complex, arbitrary, and oppressive taxes. They worked as tenants on land owned by individual landlords or the state and could be liable for various dues, including sheep dues, lambing customs, pasturage usage, tithes, fixed dues on vineyards, orchards, vegetable gardens, mills, and privately owned houses and sheds. The Turkish system of devshirme, which forcibly conscripted young men to join the imperial service, was a significant burden on the Greek national consciousness. By the turn of the century, resistance to the development had become open and violent. Elliniki Nomarchia, or the rule of law for Greece, is a comprehensive statement in Greek about the Greek situation and the path to liberation, applying this philosophy to the present situation of the Greeks. The Church reacted vigorously to the Enlightenment ideas with the paternal exhortation issued by the Patriarchate in 1798 rejecting Rousseau's theory, and reasserting the view that true liberty was living according to divine and human laws. Ideas to invigorate Greek education came from abroad, with most of the money coming from prosperous Greek merchants in major cities of Europe. Schools fell into three categories: primary, secondary, and academies, which extended the range to philosophy and sciences. Some saw education and enlightenment as the keys to Greece's liberation, as new ideas would emerge and old ones would wither away. Adamantios Korais and Rigas Ferios were prominent figures in the early Greek independence movement. Born in 1757 in Thessalian village Velestino, they were secretary to the princely governor and an Austrian baron who brought them to Vienna in 1790. Rigas's most notable works include a revolutionary hymn and a proposed constitution for a new Greek republic. He believed in the supremacy of the law as the sole guide and declared the rights of man, including equality, liberty, security of life, and property. Regis's proposals for the constitution were far-sighted, including civilian control of the military, open government, and a welfare state. He adapted the principles of American and French revolutionary declarations for Greece, aiming for a constitution that would be inscribed on copper tablets and set up in every town and village. His contributions to the Greek cause were significant, as he printed and distributed his calls for revolt throughout the Greek Orthodox world. Adamantios Korais, born in Smyrna, was 10 years older than Regis, but far outlived him. He spent his youth in education in a city where it was almost unattainable, studying medicine in Montpellier and reaching Paris in 1788. Despite his passion for learning, Korais had ill health and hatred of the Turks. Korais believed that education was the basis of the French Revolution, and that military success was due to learning. He encouraged rich Greeks to invest in education and send promising youths to Europe to bring their benefits back to Greece. He saw the French and American revolutions as models for Greece and held this opinion consistently throughout the 19th century. Korais's insistence on education came across as single-issue fanaticism, as he did not appreciate the realities of the situation. Both Regis and Korais were forceful for change by disseminating Enlightenment ideas, articulating a commitment to a regenerated nation, and using passionate rhetoric to advocate for it. Super History Rumble watermark text. In September 1814, 3 Greek expatriates in the Russian Black Sea port of Odessa established the Filiki Eteria, or Friendly Association, to liberate Greece. The founders were Skoupas, Sokolov, and Xanthos, all born in Greece but leaving to seek fortunes abroad. The organization had 5 levels: brothers, associates, priests, shepherds, and the Supreme Council, also known as the Aerati Archi, the Invisible Directorate. Membership was kept secret, with the first aim being survival. The founders developed several codes, including a simple substitution code for Greek alphabet letters, word substitution, and various names de guerre. Members had a variety of names such as Kapodistrias, the Tsar, Sir Thomas Maitland, Ali Pasha, and others. The names were often revealing, with Kapodistrias being the man of good deeds, the Tsar the philanthropist, Sir Thomas Maitland the old man, and Ali Pasha the father-in-law. Despite elaborate preparations for recruiting members, the Filiki Eteria made little progress in the first few years. The founders moved to Moscow and Constantinople, where they enrolled Georgios Sakaris and 4 Greek military captains from the Peloponnese. However, Skoupas made other, less successful initiations, such as recruiting Nikolaos Galatas. By the end of 1817, the Eteria was in a desperate state with too few members and too little money. The founders decided to devise a more realistic and practical program, choosing Xanthos's house in Constantinople, which was thronged with Greeks of all classes, and had a less efficient surveillance system than Metternich's in Vienna. The Filiki Eteria set up a permanent headquarters, identified a new market, and had a reliable source of funds. They began the search for a new chairman and chief executive entrusted to Xanthos. The society was at last within sight of becoming a national movement, but it was still far from being representative of Greek society as a whole. By the time the revolution began in 1821, the Filiki Eteria had 1,093 members, with 3/4 recruited abroad. Ali Pasha, a formidable and controversial figure in history, ruled over a vast territory with an iron fist. His life and reign were marked by both strategic brilliance and ruthless ambition. Born into a world of political intrigue and power struggles, Ali Pasha's journey to prominence was anything but ordinary. Byron described Ali Pasha as a kind and remorseless tyrant, and after Childe Harold's pilgrimage, he gained fame. Ali's satrapy encompassed most of Greece and its territory, transforming into a formidable force that great powers had to contend with. His reputation was further enhanced by the story of Euphrosyne, who was imprisoned and drowned in sacks. Ali Pasha's grandfather, a brigand in Albania, was appointed the Derbend Aga for Rumeli, Greece, and established a network of control over local officials and armed bands. This early foundation of influence and power set the stage for Ali Pasha's own ascent, as he would later leverage these connections to carve out his own dominion. The Suli region, a small part of Ali Pasha's domains, was a center of resistance for several years due to the Suliots, Albanian warriors who lived by plunder and extortion. Ali attacked Suli without success in 1790, 1792, and 1799. He blocked the Suliots by building a ring of 12 fortresses around the mountains around Suli, which was slow and dangerous work. However, his policy of strangulation began to take effect, and by the autumn of 1803, the main body of Suliots were assembled in the stronghold of Kungi. Ioannina under Ali was one of the finest towns in Greece, with unrivaled commerce, roads, and a large covered market. The commercial results of Ali's measures were evident, with fairs held in Ioannina and a bustling bazaar. The city was home to 2 academies run by Athanasios Salidas, who criticized foreign visitors for their involvement in the Fourth Crusade and their removal of Greek antiquities. During the Napoleonic Wars, Ali sought to gain advantage from France, Russia, Britain, and Turkey, but obtaining their favor was complicated due to shifting alliances and victories of one nation or another. The Ionian Islands were affected by these shifting alliances, and Ali's neighboring territory, the Ionian Islands, was affected by these shifting alliances. Ali Pasha faced significant challenges during his reign, including losing key supporters and being unable to gain support from outside powers. He was unable to secure the town of Preveza and was eventually killed by Khurshid Pasha in January 1821. His destabilization of the Ottoman Empire and Europe can be compared to Napoleon's destabilization of Europe. In April 1820, Alexander Ypsilantis was appointed as the leader of the Filiki Eteria and sought support from Russia, specifically from Capodistrias and the Tsar. He initially planned a revolt in Moldavia and Wallachia, but by October 1820, he announced that the revolution should be launched in the Peloponnese before the end of the year. However, his contacts in the Peloponnese told him that the Peloponnese was not yet ready, so he reverted to the original idea of starting the revolt in Moldavia and Wallachia. Moldavia and Wallachia were 2 parts of present-day Romania, separated by the Carpathian Mountains from Transylvania. They were fertile and productive parts of the Ottoman domains, providing food for Constantinople. However, wealth and culture led to decadence, making them ripe for exploitation by Turkish-appointed hospodars or governors. Ypsilantis, a Greek general, was unlikely to receive support from the people of the principalities due to their hatred of their Greek overlords and unwillingness to change their lives. Some leaders, such as Governor Michael Soutsos of Moldavia and Iorgaki Olimpiotis of Bucharest, supported Ypsilantis' cause. In Wallachia, intrigue was rife, with Governor Alexander Soutsos setting up a caretaker government of native nobles or boyars to establish Wallachian rights. Military commander Theodore Vladimirescu was sent into western Wallachia to create disturbances, but his private motive was to make himself the prince of an independent Wallachia. Ypsilantis considered different strategies, such as seizing Turkish fortresses on the southern side of the Danube or moving quickly to Bucharest. However, Vladimirescu seized control of Bucharest, issued a proclamation calling for the assembly of Wallachians against the government of the Phanariot Greeks, and petitioned to Constantinople, indicating his conciliatory attitude towards the Turks. However, 2 almost simultaneous interventions from outside disrupted the maneuvers for power within the principalities. One intervention was the Orthodox Church's anathema against Ypsilantis' revolt, signed by the Patriarch and 22 other bishops. The other intervention was unexpected, as the previous year had seen an outbreak of revolutionary activity in several parts of Europe. Capodistrias, Russia's joint foreign minister, was accused of disowning Ypsilantis' rising and ordered him to withdraw from the principalities. Ypsilantis' venture into Austria was doomed due to the Turks' preparations to move against him from their fortresses on the southern bank of the Danube. Michael Soutsos, disillusioned by Ypsilantis' enterprise and threat of Turkish invasion, fled with his family across the Pruth into Bessarabia. Vladimirescu's harsh discipline made him increasingly unpopular with his officers and men. Ypsilanti's escape route to the north was open, and by mid-June he had reached Rymnicu. In the winter of 1820 to 1821, Greeks and Turks lived in an uneasy atmosphere due to the mountainous nature of the Peloponnese, which was largely mountainous with limited fertile plains. Communication and transport were easier by sea than land, and well-established harbors became the main centers of population. The government of the Peloponnese allowed for the autonomy of one of its provinces, the Mani. The Mani had always been warlike, and their privileges increased due to the revolt of 1770 inspired by Russia through Count Gregory Orlov. The Greeks were abandoned by their Russian instigators, and the Turks used Albanian mercenaries to suppress the rising. 6 years later, jurisdiction over the Mani was transferred from the Pasha of the Morea to the Kapitan Pasha, head of the Turkish army and navy. Under their local beys, the Mani began to enjoy increased prosperity in an era characterized as the Golden Age of Mani. In December 1820, two Greeks, Theodoros Kolokotronis and Gregorios de Chios, arrived in the Peloponnese, personifying the revolution for Greece. Kolokotronis had a clear plan of action, while Papaflesis, a firebrand orator, arrived in December 1820, naming the Feast of the Annunciation as the date of the rising. Political and church leaders in the Peloponnese needed to establish trust in Papaflesis's grandiose proposals. The Greek Revolution began in March 1821 with 4 towns claiming to be the starting point: Areopolis, Kalamata, Vostitsa, and Kalabrita. The sequence of events can be confused due to 2 different sets of dates: the Julian or Old Style and the Gregorian or New Style. Areopolis claims primacy, with the church of Agios Mikhail standing as a symbol of the revolution. Armed Greeks began assembling outside Kalamata from the 20th of March onwards, and the Turks of Kalamata surrendered on the 23rd of March. The victorious Greek leaders set up a Senate of Messenia, and Petrobi was proclaimed both leader of this Senate and commander-in-chief of the Spartan forces. The Turks of Vostitsa fled across the Gulf of Corinth and took refuge in the inland town of Salona, modern Amphissa. At Kalavrita, matters were resolved with equal dispatch, and the Turks were taken captive on the 26th of March. The Greeks successfully resisted the Turks in 4 towns, including Patras, which was situated opposite the British-controlled Ionian Islands. The spark that ignited the revolt came from a burning house on March 23rd, which destroyed around 200 houses and sparked street fighting between Turks and Greeks. In the early days of the Greek-Turkish War, the Turkish forces surrounded the town of Patras, while the Greeks armed themselves with small-caliber guns. Sharpshooting proved more effective, and the Greeks lost their best gunner, an Italian, to a single shot from a sniper on the Turkish ramparts. Both sides were anxiously awaiting reinforcements, with help for the Greeks arriving first. On April 3rd, Yusuf entered Patras, causing the Greeks to flee their religious festival. Green saved his consulate with the help of a British ship crew and Yusuf in person with his troops. However, Turkish troops went on the rampage, beheading about 40 Greeks and causing their bodies to be thrown into the street. In the early stages of the war on land, the Greeks had 3 immediate objectives: to prove Greek resistance would not crumble under the first counterattack by the Turks, to show that the Greeks could capture a stronghold held by the Turks, and to block the 2 routes Turkish troops could march south to the Gulf of Corinth. Kolokotronis, who had marched triumphantly into Kalamata, faced several challenges, including being left alone and having to hide in the trees as a Turkish unit passed. He refused to besiege the southwestern fortresses of Mathoni, Koroni, and Navarino, instead focusing on rebuilding the army of the central Peloponnese. In 1821, Greek forces in the area around Tripolis were gradually augmented by locals and captains returning from the south. Kolokotronis was appointed archistrategos, and armed camps of Greeks were established in a semicircle of villages to the west of Tripolis. The Greeks prepared to make a stand at Valtetsi, which was in the center of the semicircle of Greek-held posts west of Tripolis. Mustafa Bey, the newly appointed lieutenant governor of the Morea, was a warlike and able man in Kolokotronis's view. The Greeks prepared to make a stand at Valtetsi, which was on a defensible hill in the plain and closer to Tripolis than other villages. The village church of Valtetsi was fortified and 3 tamburia were built, redoubts of stone wall about 3 feet high with apertures for firing and a ditch running round the inside so that the defenders' heads were below the parapet. Despite Turkish expectations, the Greeks did not flee but maintained their position. Kolokotronis justified this by claiming that the battle established the good fortunes of the Greeks and that they might never have made another stand. The Peloponnese castles were crucial for controlling the region for centuries, being occupied by various groups, including the Byzantines, Venetians, Franks, and Turks. The Greeks laid siege to Monemvasia with 1,400 men, but the siege lasted for 2 months due to hunger and starvation conditions. The capture of Monemvasia was a token objective, and its fall was almost wholly psychological. Greek sailors have been involved in maritime activities since Odysseus's voyage from Troy, and their temperament was suited to the type of seafaring that required a small band of equals serving as captains for the duration of a voyage. The Greek revolutionary fleet was drawn almost exclusively from 3 small and separated islands, Hydra and Spetses off the northeast coast of the Peloponnese and Sara in the northern Aegean. These islands enjoyed more freedom than the mainland, being left alone provided they paid their relatively light taxes and contributed the annual quota of sailors to the Turkish navy. The Greeks were well used to making their own voice heard, with decisions taken before and during the voyage only after the captain had consulted the crew. The 3 naval islands had prospered from their grain-carrying merchant fleets and running the British blockade of the southern French coast during the Napoleonic Wars. However, the fall in value of the Turkish piastre was cutting profits, and the defeat of Napoleon led to a reduction in grain prices in Europe. The Greek fleet was designed not as warships but as merchantmen, with command in the Greek fleet being anything but unified. The Turkish navy during the 18th and 19th centuries was significantly larger and more powerful than the Greek fleet. These ships were classified into 6 classes or rates, with the largest being ships of the line, which had 3 masts and were divided into 6 classes or rates. The relationship between tonnage, number of guns, and number of crew for Nelson's victory was similar across the entire range of early 19th century fighting ships. The Greek fleet maintained a balance between the Turkish and Greek fleets due to their superior maneuverability and the use of fire ships. Greek ships were lighter, could get underway, and tack more quickly than the Turks, and their racing skills and boat design had been developed for beating blockades. The 1821 revolution in Greece and Asia Minor had significant repercussions on towns with mixed Turkish and Greek populations. In Greece, the Greeks gained dominance, while Turks suffered most in other parts of Greece and Asia Minor. Turkish government policy and local feelings of resentment put individuals, families, and communities in danger. Macrianus nearly died at the hands of the Turks in Arta, where he was arrested and tortured. At Smyrna, the whole Greek community was in danger as Turkish forces assembled to fight rebels in Moldavia, Wallachia, or the Peloponnese. The most dramatic example of the Turkish reaction to the revolution was at Constantinople, where Sultan Mahmud II ascended the throne in 1808 and held it until his death in 1839. Mahmud's reign was dominated by building an army to support his authority and controlling the unruly provinces of the Ottoman Empire and the encroachment of Russia. Mahmud chose the public execution at Easter of Greek Orthodox Patriarch Gregorios as his most dramatic response to the Greek rebellion, which did nothing to quell his rebellious subjects and violently antagonized the Greeks' fellow Orthodox nation and potential ally, Russia. Turkish authorities attempted to further antagonize Russia, but failed. The Russian ambassador, Count Stroganov, was arrested on suspicion of providing funds for Greek rebels, and the Turks began seizing grain ships flying the Russian flag as they passed Constantinople. Tsar Alexander issued an ultimatum to the Ottoman government, arguing that the Turks insulted the Orthodox faith, proscribing Russia's fellow Christians, breaking Russo-Turkish treaties, and threatening to disturb the peace Europe had bought at a great sacrifice. The document attached to Gregorios's hanging corpse fails to establish a case against him, as he had done all he was asked to do in condemning the revolution. During the Greek Revolution, Kolokotronis and Mustafa, the Kahaya Bey, aimed to take Tripolis in the central Peloponnese. Tripolis was located on an open plain about 2,000 feet above sea level and was surrounded by an amphitheater of barren mountains, the Tricorpha. The Greeks, led by Mustafa, brought seasoned troops, including 1,500 Albanian mercenaries under their commander Elmez Aga, and a total garrison of 9,000 to 10,000 men under arms. The Greek forces around Tripolis steadily increased from 2,000 or 3,000 to about 6,000, drawn up along the Tricorpha foothills in 4 main groups. They needed supplies from nearby villages, ammunition, and the mountain village of Dimitsana. In July 1821, Dimitrios Ypsilantis arrived at the Greek camp and met Frenchman Baleste, who was a veteran of Napoleon's armies and knew the language and conditions of Greece. A three-way split emerged among the Greeks, with one party supporting Ypsilantis, the military leaders, and the senior clergy and civilian leaders. The Greeks attempted to deprive Tripolis of drinking water, polluted the water supply with a poisonous plant called phlomos, and set up markets under the walls to lessen food shortages. However, this ended when Greek forces surprised an escorted group that had gone to fetch grain from a village a few miles north of Tripolis, killing hundreds of Turks. Overcrowding and lack of water and food led to an outbreak of disease in the embattled town. A quicker means of victory seemed to be offered by the delivery of 3 mortars seized after the fall of Monemvasia to the Greek camp. Rabaud was tasked with repairing the Greek artillery at Tripolis, which had been damaged by Tassi and spiked. Dimitrios Ypsilantis offered surrender terms to the besieged Turks, which were rejected. The town's predicament worsened as Greek forces increased to between 10,000 and 20,000, and news that the Greeks had blocked the advance of a Turkish army from the north down the Thermopylae route made Tripolis unrelieved that year. Divisions began to appear among the besieged, with one party proposing fighting through the encircling Greeks and joining their compatriots in the fortress of Palamidi at Nafplion. The Albanians under Elmez Aga looked for the most profitable outcome, likely involving a separate agreement with the Greeks. The surrender party in Tripolis decided to open negotiations using Greek hostages held in appalling conditions. The Turks demanded that the hostages write a letter to their compatriots outside, which was successful. Representatives of the two sides met in a tent, and discussions continued over the next 10 days. Greek leaders drafted a formal arrangement for the division of spoils, but these formulae were ignored, and the national treasury received nothing. Dimitrios Ypsilantis left the camp, and the Albanians agreed to leave for Epirus with their weapons and possessions, provided they joined Ali Pasha's forces fighting the Turks. The siege and sack of Tripolis in the early 20th century was a brutal act committed by the Greeks, killing around 2,000 Greeks, mostly women and children. Kolokotronis wielded the greatest authority and gained most from the siege and sack of Tripolis, outmanufacturing both Ypsilantis and the civilian leaders. In 1821, the Greeks captured 4 fortresses, blocked Turkish advances north of the Gulf of Corinth, and had their first success with a fire ship. The war was led by various bodies, including a single Peloponnesian Senate in Patras and 2 regional governments in mainland Greece. The military was subordinated to the civilian government, reflecting the European outlook of both Mavrokordatos and Negris. Greek society was divided into 3 main regions: the Peloponnese, West Rumeli, and East Rumeli. Each region sought recognition of its status and interests in a centralized government. The Greeks' War of Independence was characterized by divisions within society, with the military being subordinated to civilian governments and the primates holding significant wealth based on land. The second social group consisted of military captains, who had previously been either a brigand cleft or an armatolos hired by the Ottoman government to control the clefts. The third social group was drawn from merchants in the Ottoman Empire, phanariats, and Greek professional men who had been educated abroad. Alexander Mavrokordatos, from one of the leading phanariat families, was the most prominent westernizer. The Assembly of Epidavros, held in the last weeks of 1821, was a gathering of 59 members from the Peloponnese, East and West Rumeli, and the Aegean Islands. Mavrocordatos was elected president of the assembly, and the Constitution of Epidavros was drafted within a fortnight. The Constitution established the machinery of the state, with 3 independent arms of government providing checks and balances against each other, much like the American model. The Greeks at Epidaurus deceived Europe, focusing on recognition and money. The new government formed at Epidavros was designed to be effective in coordinating Greece's war effort, but was designed to be weak, with both the executive and Senate being empowered to veto. English utilitarian philosopher and jurist Jeremy Bentham criticized the Constitution's plethora of potential vetoes and the division of powers between the arms of government. Mavrocordatos was the main beneficiary of the assembly, achieving a constitution and leading position in the newly formed national government. He left Hydra to defend Mesolongi against the Turkish navy and returned to Mesolongi to build up support throughout the region. During the Greek Revolution, European governments had little sympathy for Greece, but their subjects often took a different view. Travelers visited Greece after the Napoleonic Wars, and the study of Latin and Greek became the mainstay of higher education. Many saw Greeks as representing Christianity and the birthplace of Europe's civilization. The shocks of the Napoleonic Wars shaped European powers' policies, leading to the Quadruple Alliance and the Quintuple Alliance. The Holy Alliance, initiated in September 1815 by the Tsar, was a Christian nation formed by Russia, Austria, and Prussia, who considered themselves members of one family. The alliance was anathema to progressives, as it was anathema to the Greek situation. However, the formation of the Holy Alliance seemed to signal a commitment by governments to act from religious principle rather than self-interest. In 1821, 3 disparate characters, Maxime Raybaud, a Polish ex-soldier, a watchmaker's apprentice, and a tall blonde Piedmontese, took ship to fight for Greek independence. The voyage had diversions and excitements, as they were divided into 4 groups for daily arms drill under the officers. The French authorities closed the port to ships bound for Greece at the end of 1822, possibly due to Metternich's pro-legitimacy lines or reports of returning Philhellenes finding misery, death, and ingratitude. Many volunteers, particularly the idealistic young, relied on the goodwill of others to travel to Marseille and Greece. Committees were formed to raise money to help them on their way, with the most numerous being in democratic Switzerland and the German states. Greece committees were established in Spain, France, England, Russia, and America, with activities including raising subscriptions, organizing relief for Greek refugees, and pressuring their governments to act on the Greeks' behalf. In Russia, there was widespread sympathy for the Greeks, based on Russia's special debt to Greece as the bringer of Christianity to Russia. Prince Alexander Golitsyn, a government minister and one of Russia's leading Philhellenes, was the prime mover in raising funds for the Greeks. The number of Greek refugees in Russia was significant, with nearly 4,000 reaching Odessa in a single day. Russian Philhellenic activity aimed to ransom Greeks enslaved by the Turks, but this proved more difficult than helping refugees. About half of the ransom money was later transferred to refugee relief, and the rest passed to Kapodistrias's government to combat hunger and poverty in Greece. In 1821, Philhellene volunteers arrived in Greece and needed a military unit to support them. The Greek forces were mostly composed of bands attached to independent captains, making it difficult for Europeans to join. The regiment Baliste was recruited, which was intended to be the core of a Greek regular army run on European lines and controlled by the Greek government. France's military system was adopted, giving extreme satisfaction to the French volunteers. The number of Greek regulars reached 200, but slowly rose to 600 in the lifetime of the force. A uniform was devised and distributed, but basic necessities were almost non-existent. The first attempt of the regiment Baleste was an assault on the Palamidi fortress at Navplion in December 1821, which was a total failure. Some of the Philhellenes became disillusioned, and Baleste left shortly after to join the revolution in Crete. Mavrokordatos, president of the executive in the newly formed government, accepted that Europeans could play a useful role in the revolution, but now accepted that they should form a unit of their own. By the summer of 1822, the Turks were in a stronger position to repeat their attempt to march south. Mavrokordatos challenged the Turks to a set-piece battle on the plain of Pita, within sight of Arta, where the main body of Turkish troops was assembled under Ömer Vrionis. By July, Mavrokordatos's forces were barely 2,000 men, compared to his initial goal of raising 3 or 4 times that number. The dream of the Philhellene volunteers to play a noble part in the liberation of Greece came to an end with their commander Dania killed in hand-to-hand fighting. Chios, a part of the Ottoman Empire, was prosperous before the Greek Revolution. The island had a strong Italian influence, with Venetians, Genoese, and Florentines as leading families. The Chians became wealthy through commerce, hiring ships for transport and becoming commercial agents in major cities. The Turkish presence was minimal, with local demougerants elected by leading merchants. The island had a welfare state in miniature with a free school, hospital, and special hospitals for lepers and plague victims. However, in May 1821, a fleet from Hydra and Sara arrived to persuade the Chians to join the revolution. The Turks took 40 hostages from the leading Chian citizens, and 1,000 disorderly troops crossed from Chesme, attacking and murdering the citizens and plundering their houses. In 1822, the Samians attempted to involve Chios in the struggle for independence, but the local Turks retreated into the citadel, leading to a battle. The Sultan's reaction was decisive, taking 7 wealthy Chians in Constantinople hostage and sending 15,000 men to Chios. The Chians, a group of refugees from the Turkish invasion of Chios, faced numerous challenges, including ambushes, murders, and forced enslavement. The only hope for escape was from the west coast, where the harbor of Mesta was a popular anchorage. Many refugees went to other islands or the mainland to join the fight for independence, and many eventually returned to Chios. Turkish troops on Chios turned from slaughter to the more profitable business of enslavement, taking 45,000 Chiots as slaves by the end of May. The Chios slave trade was a brutal and costly affair, with many captives being sold to the British for ransom. The Greek fleet attacked the Turks in the channel between Chios and the mainland, leading to the loss of the Kapitan Pasha and his flagship. The final toll on the suffering island was estimated to be between 100,000 and 120,000 Greeks living on Chios. The near destruction of a population in Chios, Greece was primarily due to the disproportionate Ottoman response to Logothetis' incursion. The sheer number of Turkish troops pouring into and out of the island presaged disaster, particularly because Kara Ali was unable to properly control his varied forces.